We are now going to tie all of these threads together and put the strategy part of the Sydney International Strategy Forum into effect. And to help us set up the context for that and some direction, we're going to hear first from one of our keynote speakers, General David Berger. General Berger is a Marine, the 38th Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, graduate of Tulane, a native of Maryland, not far from where I grew up. 42 years in the Marine Corps with a variety of combat and command tours, Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan, as you heard. I've known about General Berger for some time. My grandpa, father, brother, father-in-law, all Marines. General Berger was a truly transformational Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps, which is a transformational service. I'm sure General Berger has heard of Pete Ellis, who 100 years before him was a major, a troublemaker, who traveled throughout the Pacific Islands, died under mysterious circumstances, I think in Palau, after drinking all night with Japanese intelligence officers. But he basically designed the Marine Corps' concept of amphibious operations and identified the importance of the Pacific, and especially Melanesia, Micronesia, to what he could see 20 years before it happened would be the center of the fight for supremacy in Asia. So General Berger is a similar kind of Marine, although he made it all the way to 4-star general. Because when the Marine Corps looked at the pacing threat, it had to make some big changes. And General Berger made those hard choices and made those changes and designed the force concept that has set the Marine Corps' trajectory. So great way for us to start the last panel with a leader who has thought about the military operations, the strategic picture, and what has to be done. So General Berger, thank you, and over to you.
Well, I did not know Mike until probably 5 or 6, 7 years ago. And Kurt Campbell suggested that we have a monthly dinner to think about U.S.-China relations. And this will be a short story, but anyway. So a group of 10 or 12 people once a month at the Commandant's house and General Brown's house, we would alternate just to talk about trying to understand China. That's where I met Mike. And I thought I understood something about China because I had been studying them deeply for a decade. First dinner, I quickly learned I should take notes and shut up and listen to Mike and Kurt and the others. I am very grateful for them allowing me to be here today. Just for my own kind of understanding, how many of folks here have ever been to Darwin? Or have family there or something like that? Fantastic, great. Darwin, if you haven't been there, in the northwest part of the country, pretty desolate area, not very populated, a lot of desert around it. And that's actually Darwin, California, not Australia. But Marines have never trained in Darwin, California, that I know of. We come here. I'm starting there because you might ask why the Marines go to Darwin. And the Marines go to Darwin, if you're not familiar with it, you might think it's a great place to train. The Australian Defence Force is there to train alongside. It's right on the water. You have the amphibious part of it. Lots of reasons to go to Darwin. I'm going to tell you the other reason we go to Darwin. In the 1970s, in Darwin, they started a competition, and Marines are very competitive by nature. They started a competition called a beer can regatta. Okay, the beer can regatta, if you're a Marine, there's all kind of things to like about just that, right? The beer part, the water part, it's competitive. So we started going to Darwin in 2012. Part of an agreement between Australia and the U.S. as a rotational force. It took us 10 years to win that competition. 10 years. And we won it for 2 years straight. But while I was a commandant, like that was the proudest moment of my life. And then we lost in 2023. And I wasn't there, but I got to believe we lost because being Marines who like to drink beer, we probably focused more on how many cans we could create than building the freaking boat that might win the race. So now the Australians have the trophy again. In 2012, there were about 200 Marines in Darwin, the first rotation. A captain, a couple hundred Marines. By 2019, 2,500 Marines. Aircraft, logistics, 6 months, artillery. We're training not next to each other, but integrated with Australian Army forces. I mean, literally on the same artillery tube, mixed teams of U.S. Marines and Australian artillery on the same artillery piece. This is how far we've gone. I'm starting there because that was not a foregone conclusion. There was resistance here in Australia. There was definitely resistance in the United States to the Marine Corps sending 2,500 Marines to Australia, because that would mean we're not somewhere else. Here's how that happened, the inside story. A lot of pressure from Australia, eventually, to get Marines here. The Marines wanted to come here, but politically, policy-wise, there was a thought this was off the beaten path. This was too far away from Taiwan and everything else. It was the first time I really saw up close, personally, a reversal, a change in how we executed our policy. And it was because of sustained good dialogue with folks here in Australia that painted a strategic picture of why we needed to increase the size of the force and bring it up to 2,500. And now there's not just 2,500 Marines in Darwin for 6 months. We have equipment and aircraft, MV-22s, helicopters, year-round. Pre-positioned here, maintained here, in a high state of readiness. And I'll just stop on that point right there because you can finish the rest of that paragraph. All because some key people in Australia kept the pressure on the U.S. to change, to make it happen, and it worked. All that against a lot of resistance on the other end. I was asked to talk about the question, can allies change or affect U.S. policy? One word is yes. No, there's no question, no debate. But I'm going to build you the argument quickly. Historically, has this ever happened before where we have changed our policy because of influence from our allies, from our partners? I'm going to give you a few. 1981, General Jaruzelski in Poland declared martial law in Poland. There's a lot of people here are historians much better than I do. The U.S. response in 1981, now we're talking President Reagan, right? Not a softie at all. He says, we will stop transferring anything related to natural gas technology to any European countries. In other words, we're going to penalize Russia because of this martial law declaration. Now, you can imagine how our European partners and allies took that, right? This was in the wintertime of 1981. 9 months later, complete reversal. Why? Because France, UK especially in the UK, Margaret Thatcher publicly in international forums calls out the U.S., at this time, our tightest partner, and says how devastating this is to not just her country, but to the framework of NATO. And she took great risks here. A lot of courage. Because the Allies needed the natural gas. 9 months later, President Reagan completely reverses that decision. This is the first time I saw it. Second time I saw it was when President Duterte was elected in the Republic of the Philippines. Immediately shut off, went public with, he's basically switching alliances from the United States to somebody else. And you know who that is. Cut off all training, kicked out all the military from the U.S. military from the Republic of the Philippines, no more training alongside them, really hard line. Immediately, in the military and in every State Department person that I know of, the phones start ringing from the Philippines, our counterparts like, don't panic, don't overreact. Just take a deep breath. And it wasn't probably 6 months later, we're back in the Philippines. We're able to train alongside of them. We had to modify some of the purposes of the training, but it didn't matter. It was a complete reversal of policy. Mainly this time because of a strong ally for a lot of years, us and the Philippines, below the presidential level, exerting pretty good influence. We got back in, and thank goodness that we did. You don't need me to list all the examples in the last two and a half years in the Russo-Ukraine war where the U.S. had a declaratory policy of doing something or not doing something, and then reversed later on. Long-range weapons, the use of long-range weapons, maintenance, intelligence sharing, where we took a hard line, no, and then over time, because of pressure from our allies primarily, we changed. We changed our policies for all the right reasons. And I probably aren't done changing our policies in the Russo-Ukraine war. A completely non-military one, 2021, height of COVID. For some reasons, we were asked and not going to supply any COVID-related like oxygen supplies, masks, medicines to India related to the COVID pandemic. We said no when they asked us. A couple phone calls from the right people in India. The only one I never asked Mr. Sullivan about it, but one phone call in particular from the Indian National Security Advisor to Jake Sullivan, and in 48 hours, floodgates open. We're flying now stuff to India, where 48 hours before it was a hard no. We don't have an alliance with India. The power, I'm starting there because historically, multiple times we have changed our policy for the right reasons due to influence from the outside. If that's true, those are all facts. That's not debatable, right? Just happened. If that's true, then if we pick up the ball there and look into the future, how can our allies, our partners, our friends, how can you all influence our policies going forward? First off, I would say, do not take for granted the advantage that you have, which is you all, frankly, more than most Americans, you watch our news, you study us, you understand our culture, you understand how we think. So if you want to change, if you want to influence our policies, you're already starting halfway down the road because you understand us. I'm asking you, don't take that for granted. You're already starting at step 3. You're not starting from scratch. You're going to get a very good read on us very early on. It's a huge advantage because you not just understand our processes, I believe, in my 40 years, you understand our culture. If that's true, I believe that it is. You may disagree with me, then how can Australia and Japan and our other close friends, how do you use agency, which I hadn't heard that term until a couple weeks ago, leverage, trust, whatever the several factors are that combine to make agency, how are you going to, that you have accrued over years, decades, how are you going to use that? How might you use that? Because it's certainly, beginning with the doomsday discussion this morning, it's kind of unclear. It's kind of cloudy right now. So how do you use that? A few thoughts. First, and nothing I'm going to tell you is brand new or earth-shattering. You heard during the course of today, separate the immediate, like the triage, start the breathing, stop the bleeding, the immediate, separate that, what you got to do now, in terms of U.S. policy from the longer term. Put them into two categories and think about them differently. I think I start there because we tend to focus too many times on the immediate, the fire this afternoon. You all have phones. You're trying to solve the crisis this afternoon, and we say, we're going to get around to that long term, and we don't. I'm pleading with you, you have to handle the brush fire this afternoon. Also, think beyond. And the hints of it you should have picked up today, I did in my notes, the processes, the structures, the things that we're not going backwards. So what, in terms of planning, if you want to influence policy going forward, near term is the brush fire, but spend time on the long term, what the long term looks like and how you're going to influence U.S. policy long term. I think in another way, you can divide this into two categories also. If you want to stop the U.S. from doing something, that's certainly one category, one policy. It's a completely different approach if you want us to start doing something that we're not, a new policy. You want us to do something we're not currently doing. I would divide it that way also, because in my mind, there's probably different approaches. If it's to stop, if some policy that we have right now, and you would prefer an ally, a partner would like for us to stop doing that. Some things to think about. This isn't a prescription or a menu. I'm just offering you what 4 decades helps you to frame. First of all, I would think about which is it that you're really after, and what are you willing to accept? Do you want us to stop doing whatever it is, that policy, completely? Or do you want us to just throttle it back a little bit or maybe delay it? Knowing that up front is important. Because termination, okay, you're going to make that kind of an argument. But if you just want us to slow the train down, that's a different way to construct an argument. Or just cut it back a bit. What concessions are you willing to offer? In the near term, the next few years, everything will be a negotiation. And it always actually has been. But now, I would go into it thinking that. What is it that you can put on the table as a concession if you want us to stop doing a policy? There is an approach of teaming up. Mira has a great way of capturing this. Locking arms, coming together, a united front, and this is more like Margaret Thatcher and NATO. You basically decide that we're going to come en masse at the United States. There are times, I believe, when that's necessary. Not always, but there are those times. When you do that, just understand, just like any other competition, you're putting it all on the table at that point. Because we're humans, right? If 10 humans are coming at you, all ganging up on you at one time, there's some risk there. But that's kind of the nuclear approach, right? And sometimes that's the only approach that will work. And you all are much wiser than me, and you'll know whether to do that publicly or not. But certainly the risk is elevated that it might go the wrong way. But there are certainly policies or strategic issues where collectively is the best way, a united front. We may talk about this more in depth later on, but I would not view it as, try to find a way, and if you want the U.S. to stop a policy, or at least slow it down, find a way where it's not going to be perceived as a net loss. Let's say it's Japan and the U.S. or Australia and the U.S., where it's not a net loss on either side. Some of that may be concessions, but some of it may be things that you can offer to soften that blow a little bit or offset it. Don't view it as I would offer to you, please don't view it as a net loss, because if it's perceived as that, they'll pick up on that pretty quickly. Find a way to offset that perception. Now, if you want us to start doing something, if you want the U.S. to institute a policy that's something we're not doing right now, different approach. What's the benefit to the U.S.? Here's where your cultural understanding of us is going to pay off. Put yourself in our shoes and say, if you want us to start doing something we're not doing already, what's the benefit to the United States? Who gets the credit? Whose idea was it? Because eventually this thing will be public, and knowing up front who's going to get the credit for it might affect how you market it, how you have that discussion. I know it seems like a trivial thing. In a perfect world, who cares who gets the credit? Well, the real world is who gets the credit actually can matter. This third one, at the risk of sounding like too cute, I would say your understanding over a long period of time and the use of your human network with the U.S., I would give some thought to where to inject that idea, that policy initiative that we're not doing right now. Because where you inject that matters. You shoot too low, too junior of people in the wrong place, kind of like a serum in your body, it's not going to get any traction. Too high, and you may get an immediate no. Finding the right place, and it's not always hierarchical, and you all are much better at this than me. But I'm just asking you to, without being too cute, figure out, because it's not always the official channels that you want to convey that initially. Using the network, figuring out where you want to inject that, and then reinforce that, and then help it percolate to the top, I think can be powerful. And you know our system and our culture, and you have the network already in place. It's not something you need to build. You already know us. Now, if that's the stop it or start it, and there's a lot more to that, of course, and you all are much more adept at that than I am. How will you know if it's working? What are the indicators? What's the barometer that you might use to see if this is working? A couple of thoughts here, and I'd be fascinated to hear your own. You would listen for how the U.S. views this and characterizes it, not you. If you wanted to test, if you wanted to listen to see if this is getting traction or not, you really want to listen how the officials in the U.S. government perceive it and characterize it and talk about it. And it's probably going to, here, I mean, either it's a multilateral or is it a bilateral sort of notion? How they characterize it. How does the Chinese react to it once it's in the public realm? It's going to matter. Why? Because there are people in the United States government and yours who, if it may not be the best idea in the world, but if it really makes the PRC angry, okay, let's talk about it. Let's get under their skin. So watching how the threats not just China, but our threats react, probably, are they happy or are they sad? Probably not a bad indicator. If it's a policy reversal, definitely, just like in your countries, how the press reacts to it is a good barometer, is a good indicator. Nothing new here, right? Lastly, I would say, this may be a statement of the obvious to y'all, but if it's a new policy and you're encouraging the U.S. to do it, how do you know if it's really getting traction? Is it resourced? All of us were taught a long time ago, I can tell you what your strategy is if you show me your budget. This is that equation. Because you may hear people talk about, great idea, let's think about it, let's have some discussions, but if you don't see the dollars going there, it is not going very far. If you want a policy in the U.S. and you want to see if it's getting momentum, watch where the resources go. I was told once, as a major, I think, in a school environment, that I waited too long in this small group during that year. I waited too long to weigh in. The instructor, the colonel, was teaching me that in every debate, every discussion, there's a point at which even the best idea thrown onto the table too late is too late. There's sort of a momentum in a discussion, and the group is not going to back the truck up for even a better idea. It just doesn't happen. This is human dynamics, which you already know. I think the reason I mention that, I think Australia, Japan, sort of like the best idea too late. You're in a window where you can influence U.S. policy. There's a window where you can take a leadership role in at least regional security. It's a window. Both are going to be uncomfortable for you. No way to tell how long that window stays open, but I am 100% sure that it's not an infinite period of time. Step up, take a leadership role, influence U.S. policy, because if you don't, and the window closes too late, just like the colonel taught me so many years, too late is too late. There was a discussion, a short one, earlier today about soft power. It occurred to me this, in a friendly sort of way, is not a bad analogy for the points I'm trying probably not so well to convey. Hard power, of course, is the use of force to accomplish your goals. Soft power. Now I'm going to use it in the context of between friends, allies. Soft power is how you're going to influence U.S. policy. I think the Australians and the Japanese especially are in a position to use soft power to influence U.S. policy. You have built that agency over decades, and there comes a time to use it. That time, in my opinion, is now. And I'll just finish up with two final observations, and then I think we're going to have a great panel. And again, I hope some of you all disagree with me, or else we'll be in trouble if everybody's agreeing. Hard power, soft power, your influence on us, I'm talking about relations between friends now, should not be a break glass in time of war sort of approach, where you're holding it back for the big crisis that's going to happen and it stays in the bank. Absolutely no. You need to use your influence to affect our policy now. Do not wait for a crisis. It's not your safety blanket that sits in a bank account and you break it out just when war comes. Myth, my opinion. And the second part of it is, it's a myth that when you use it, that it's like a finite amount and now I have less of it. Everybody, I don't know you all, but I would guess if your backgrounds are anything like me, there were times in your career where somebody, your peer usually, after some meeting, some decision you made, closed the door, and then one-on-one basically told you you're about to make the dumbest move of your career. They were using their agency with you, and they didn't leave that room with less of it. They actually had more of it afterwards because you told them, thank God you told me that. You respected them more for closing the door and telling them you're being an idiot. It's a myth that you use it and have less of it. You can actually have more of it. Thanks for having me here today. Thank you.